Welcome to the Live Loving live stream with John Davis. You hear me soon? Well, hello everyone. I thought I had it unmuted. I don't know. Because that scene had it muted. Well, I'm back now, so now you should be able to hear me. This technical stuff. There you go. You can hear me now? Okay, great. That's excellent. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Hello, Gunhild. Hello, Heidi. I'm glad you can hear me. Great. Happy New Year, everyone. Iowa's in the house. Hello, Larry. How you been? Oh, good. I'm sorry. How to get past? Oh, that's lovely. I had a gentleman who had a lovely wife who I helped deal with fibromyalgia. She actually, the last part of her life, she had none of the symptoms, but she ended up still passing. She was an elderly woman, and her husband had a hard time with grief. And the whole thing about the whole life, and this being the small part, and grabbing it and dropping it and stepping on it is what I had him do. That changed his life. It made it so much easier for him. Good evening, everybody. How are you all? Welcome. Nebraska is in the house. Jumping back up here. See what I've missed before I go back any further. Thanks. Well, guys, it has been a lovely week. I spent the week pretty much in a bathrobe and slippers, hanging out at the house. I made a few videos this week. I actually have videos locked up until the 15th of January, so that's good. Hello, UK. How are you? Yeah, the music at the beginning, it's actually royalty-free music, so YouTube will not tag me for it or try to say it's somebody else's. It's royalty-free music from a guy named Kevin MacLeod. He has a company called Incompetech, and that's called the Back Bay Lounge. And I just like the sound of the Back Bay Lounge. I think it's just sounded kind of nice and easy and loose and just lovely. I hope you guys all had a great holiday, Christmas, and let's see how New Year's is going to be. And whatever topics you want to talk about, I am ready to go. So I kind of like to let these things be guided by where you want to go. So whatever you want to ask or whatever you want to talk about, just let me know. That's so good. You got off for the New Year's from Glasgow, right? Beautiful. When they do my lineage, I'm part of the Rose Lines, the Rose Castle in Scotland, so I have a little bit of Scottish in me. Don't we all, though? Really, especially on Hogmanay. So it's been a great week. I've had a wonderful time. I've had just beautiful experiences. My son was away all this week, and he's coming tomorrow for our Christmas together. So, which is typical. We tend to usually spend New Year's Day together anyway, New Year's Eve together anyway. So, but this past week, I literally just had a chance to really relax, and I didn't use my voice too much. And right now, today, I started using it again. It's a little raspy today, so I'm sitting here drinking my cider to keep it nice and cool. So, what questions do you have, good folks? I'm really excited to dive in. Well, actually, I'm kind of cheating. We already had somebody else saying Hogmanay earlier. So in the chat today, somebody has already said it. So Scotland is being well represented tonight at the Live Living live stream. I was dealing with a gentleman from Sweden the other day, and he's just a really lovely guy, and he he was like, I want to get your address. And I don't like to give my address out because I've had experiences where people like to show up at my house. And so I don't typically like to give my address out, but his secretary contacted me. He said he wanted to send me something. And so I was like, okay. So I ended up getting a beautiful bouquet of flowers from the guy, from his family, thanking me for the YouTube channel. So I was just like, it was like a wonderful, beautiful surprise. Made me feel really good. And it's made my house smell really good. So pretty excited. I did spend this week doing a lot of rebuilding in the studio. I know to you guys it looks exactly the same because of this little thing behind me. It's called a green screen. But I've been rebuilding and turning and changing and doing all kinds of different things so I can get some new stuff coming up. But as far as the week on a spiritual level, a friend of mine just released a book called "Wake Me Up Before I Go," and it's an interesting read so far. A lot of channeled messages from different channelers and stuff. So his name is Michael Ballman, and the book is called "Wake Me Up Before I Go: Recognizing Your Own Connection to Spirit." To me, it's when I read this book, it's got a lot of interesting stories in it. It's not really my brand of spirituality, but it's interesting. So he talks about many different lives he's had, and he and I have traveled all over the world together. So if you're interested, that's called "Wake Me Up Before I Go: Recognizing Your Own Connection to Spirit." So my friends, what are we talking about tonight? Let me know. Have we got no questions or topics from you guys yet? Take a quick sip. So, have you been liking the videos that have been coming out lately? I've done a few changes to them with the new intros and stuff. When you do your readings, are both of you on the Zoom call? It's interesting for me when I do a reading. I always do that channel writing an hour before, but when I'm reading the person, it really helps me read to actually see them. So it's on Zoom, and then what happens is within 10 minutes after we're done, you get a link to download the video, and so the video you'll have it within an hour after, so you'll be able to go back to it and refer to it all you want. But it does help me in the process of the reading. I had someone contact me the other day and ask me to do a phone reading, and it's just not something I'm comfortable with, and so I just don't do them. Doesn't feel right to me. I'm glad you're liking the new videos. Thank you, Bridget. I'm going to assume you meant animal communication the same way. You can do it. Yeah, it really depends on your belief. If you're focused on an animal and you say, "I am receiving a message from an animal," absolutely. Automatic writing is just a channel. Now, when you talk about channeling, imagine you have the consciousness of God, and then you have your physical world consciousness. Okay, the word channeling comes from seafaring. And what a channel is a band of water between two pieces of land from one body of water to another. So you have the consciousness of God, and you're here, and the channel is the band in between. And so basically all you're doing is you're opening up to information. And if you put your focus on an animal per se, or someone who's crossed over per se, you could easily connect to information directly from them and communicate directly from them. And I absolutely believe you can do that. Let's see. What do I know? Believe I know that Mary Magdalene was referred to by Jeshua as Ishti, which is an Aramaic word which means wife. She was absolutely real. I have very distinct memories of her. She was about, I would say she was probably only about 5'1" or 5'2". She had dark, thick, curly hair. She had like greenish, light-colored green eyes that were if you ever saw the picture of the famous picture of the Afghan girl that was on Newsweek, 20 years ago, it's the most famous Afghan girl picture ever. Her eyes were very similar to hers. She was funny. She laughed. She was beautiful. The apostle thing is an interesting thing. People ask me about, was she an apostle? During that time period, women were subjugated to men in a very big, big way. And Jeshua, though he was very, very open and spoke to everybody and did that, there was never a you are an apostle, period. Even John was not called an apostle back then. He was just a right hand man or a person who was there. We weren't the apostle. The word apostle came much later, and the idea of the hierarchies of this and the hierarchies of that were not really something that was happening during the time. That actually came much later. And yeah, she was absolutely real. I've begun the process. Let me just say it this way: I've begun the process of painting a picture of Jeshua and Miriam together laughing, and so it's going to take a while because I'm going to have to really sit down and focus on doing that. Do you ask the client to do any quiet prayer focusing before greeting on Zoom? Nope, actually I don't. Do I ask if I ask them to pray or anything? I don't. When they book a session, there's a little thing there that says, anything you'd like to talk about in the session or whatever, anything you want to focus on, just a little note or about yourself, whatever. I don't like to. I like having a focus because it makes it really clear. But a lot of times it's just tell me a little bit about yourself, and then that gives me a chance to kind of get into it before I start doing the automatic writing. But typically, I don't particularly like to know the person very well or dive into them channeling that way because I'm picking up from the oneness of God, and we're all connected. So there's no need for you to connect at the time. If you want to, that's great, but there's no need to. What are your thoughts on the miracle at Lourdes and Fatima and all? If you look at the all of the big Catholic miracles sites and all, they're all about faith. They're all about people coming with faith and belief. Now, Jeshua, when he did healings, he would give people things to put faith in. For instance, the blind man who he spit in some mud and he rubbed it on his eyes. The mud was not about making healing mud. It was about giving the guy something to put faith in. And so when you have a lot of faith, you're going to start to experience things like, for instance, Padre Pio in the stigmata. He has a big faith in the stigmata. Now, from my past life regression, I remember Joshua, being nailed through this part of his head. But Padre Pio's stigmata is here. But this is the image we see in all the Catholic artwork. So his faith is creating the experience. There was a woman in Conyers, Georgia, who had been having visitations from Mary. And it was 3 months in a row on the 30th that Mary was coming. And I heard about this, and I loaded in an airplane. I flew to Georgia, and I went out, and I was there for the last time it happened. And it was an eye-opening experience because when I was there, I was there. Tens of thousands of people were there. And they were coming from South America and Canada and all over the United States, and people came from Europe because this woman was about to have this giant experience. And I walked through the crowds and I watched people having, amazing experiences, and they're like crying and when it came time for Mother Mary to show up for this woman, she showed up inside the house where nobody else could see. And over the loudspeaker, you heard it say, "Mother Mary is here." And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is, what's going to happen. And people started taking pictures of the sun, hoping that it would dance around the sky like they say it happened in Fatima. And people kept taking pictures of the sun, and they started showing all these pictures that looked like a doorway over the sun. Now, I happen to know because of my photography hobby that I had, that you aim a square sensor towards a bright object, it will show the square sensor. So they're showing me these pictures, and they're having this miraculous experience of a doorway, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, that's the sensor that you're seeing. So people, when they have that big faith, they will see pretty much anything. And if you have a big faith in a holy site, you will have an experience. If you have a big faith in Mother Mary, you will have a big experience, because that's the manifestation of the oneness of God coming through the process of your own faith, if that makes any sense at all. I thought it was funny anyway, Becky. That's good. Scotland and Rosalind Chap. I don't know if it's Rosalind or not. I know it's the Rose family in the Rose Castle. They've been able to trace us back to that part of Scotland. But I also have lineage that goes to Ireland, Wales, and England too. I'm mainly UK. There's a smidgen of French in there too, but we UK people don't like to talk about that. I'm really glad you brought up the Rosslyn Chapel, because the Knights Temple hid the Holy Grail and all this stuff. I want you to really think about this, because the Knights Templar were medieval knights, and the Knights Templar and the orders of the medieval knights made up a whole bunch of stories to match their own mythologies. And we still live in one of their mythologies today. The years tomorrow, it's about to be 2023. But we know, because of that, in the Bible it says that Jeshua was born during the reign of, and I forget the emperor he was supposedly born in the reign of. That emperor was dead like a decade or 8 to 10 years before he supposedly was born. So we know that even our year is wrong. But we know that our year is based upon the knights and the Catholic order, and a monk specifically who created the calendar. So the story of the Holy Grail, and those are all medieval tales that were added into the story, and there is no real story along the lines from history. It's not biblical either. It doesn't mention the Holy Grail as a cup that caught his blood. That was a medieval story. But I just wanted to bring that up. Don't be embarrassed. It was funny. Find things funny in life. Don't be embarrassed at all. It was very, very funny. I loved it. So, Rosie from Mentor. Hey, hello, Rosie from Mentor. How are you? Came to mind right before you said it. Here you go. Did you paint the picture of the white light? I don't know what you're referring to. I did not paint a picture of white light. I painted a picture of Jeshua, right over there. But I've never painted the picture of just white light. I did have an inspiration today to paint a picture called Consciousness, which I have an idea for that I want to do, which I think will be really fun. Oh, well, Becky, thank you. I'm glad you glad you had a spot on reading. I never ever judge what I write, and sometimes I write things in that private that written session, and when I write them, I just okay, whatever's coming through might be weird, might be strange, but it's not for me. So I just write it, and however the chips may fall, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Why do churches never talk about our existence before we came to Earth? Ephesians 4:1. And the same as to Jesus saying, "You will do greater works than I." Well, there's a lot. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of it in this, because you have to remember that looking at the Bible itself, it's been interpreted, it's been translated, it's been edited, but even the original writings were skewed because they were written by Gnostic people and people who were of the sects of Judaism who were trying to fulfill prophecies. And so even the initial writings had leanings in very specific ways. But so you've got to, whenever you read them, you've got to really read them in two ways. Is it loving, and is it empowering to me or the individual? Because if it's empowering to somebody else or something else, then it's not Jeshua's message, because everything was about your divinity, about you being able to do everything he can do. Greater works than I have done, you will do. It is your faith that heals you. You have faith as small as a mustard seed. You can ask a mountain to move, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Everything he taught was about love and your direct relationship to love, which is God. And so it really comes down to realizing that this physical plane is just a place where we create. And whether we came here before or not, you're looking for a linear history that time doesn't exist on the other side, really. So it's kind of a strange concept to talk about, but yeah. So that's my answer to that. I hope that answers your question. Let me tell you something else about Mary Magdalene, Angel. After the crucifixion, John took both Marys into his house, Mother Mary and Ishti Mary. I'd call her Ishti Miriam, wife Miriam. And after the crucifixion, she was not the same. She was devastated. And everyone always asks whether she had children. Everyone always asks whether, she was pregnant. And she lived with John after the crucifixion for quite some time. She was not pregnant, and there were no children involved. And after time, John was supposed to go out and start teaching, and was specifically told to go to Turkey, to that area of the world. And Mary Magdalene's family came from Magdala and got her and took her back. Now, there's a wonderful story in India. In India, the time between Jeshua as a child and Jeshua at 30, during that time period in India, there is the prophet Isa, or Sri Isa as they called him, and they believe that it was Jeshua in India during those years, and I believe it too. But there's also another story in Hinduism that after the crucifixion, he came back with his wife and had children there. I have no memory of that, so I can't really talk about that as from my own personal regression stuff. But I like to think it's true because I like that. I'd like to him and her to have a happy ending. I will tell you, I do remember seeing him after the crucifixion and was blown away so much I fell on my face in front of him and he laughed at me. But I don't know whether he went and he picked up, Mariam after that and went off to India or not. But it's quite possible. It is quite possible. So amazing woman, an amazing story, and just beautiful inside where it counts. This is. This is from my husband, Darren. Darren wants to know. Sorry, I sent them too soon. Darren, my husband, wants to know, what is Rex Resin and what does it entail? is baptism by water necessary. Joshua and the disciples never baptized anybody. That was a Judaic principle that happened beforehand. But what's interesting about baptism in general, baptism was very much a Judaic ceremony. In fact, the Essenes, when you go to Qumran in Israel, they have bathing chambers where they have ritual bath chambers for those exact kind of things. But we never, there was no dogma, no ritual that Joshua said you ever needed. It literally was believe, ask, believe, and receive. Love one another. It was really so simple that we have a hard time comprehending how simple it really was. Now, what is resurrection? I did a video on this, and I'm really glad you brought it up. People ask about resurrection all the time, but in India, there are stories all over the place of gurus who have been able to transcend their body and remanifest their body. There's stories of gurus who come to raging rivers, and rather than wading through the river to get across, they project their consciousness to the other side of the river and manifest their body around it and keep walking. So I am a firm believer that this place is a reflection of our belief. And I firmly believe that if you get to the point where your consciousness is if your belief is so powerful that your consciousness can transcend the illusion. Now, why do I say this? I have been out of body. I have done astral travel. I've done astral travel that I have gotten actual evidence from my friend witnessing it. 2 hours away from where I was, I went to his house and basically projected a thought into him while he slept. And the next day he said the exact words to me. Now, was it a coincidence? You tell me whether it was a coincidence that he said the words purple rhinoceros, because he said it to me. He said, you kept saying purple rhinoceros. That's exactly what I was saying. So what did I do? I projected my consciousness to his home that was over 2 hours away. And so my consciousness was not in my body. My body was still in Annapolis, Maryland. My consciousness was in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. And so what would have happened if I would have continued further and just said, okay, I'm here now. I am now, I believe, I'm remanifesting my body around me. I personally, John Davis has not gotten there yet, but I have already projected myself that way. So that's something to think about because it's coming. Our evolution is definitely coming. Going down the list here. Yeah, and the Rosalind thing really is interesting because you don't really hear a lot about that until Dan Brown wrote Da Vinci Code. Then you heard about it a lot. Actually, Becky, the question you're asking about Joshua praying to God like we do, Joshua would not pray to God like we do, like modern Christians do, put it that way. Because modern Christians don't typically believe what they're praying for. And they just keep asking for something outside of themselves to handle it. And they go up, please God, give me this. Please God, give me this. Please God, give me this. It's the old joke of the guy says, God, I've been a good Christian my entire life. Just let me win the lottery. And after he prays this for several weeks, God's big booming voice comes from the sky and says, meet me halfway and buy a ticket, right? We have to have our thoughts, words, and deeds into action. What you believe, you put thought, word, and deed towards. And most people will sit there and continually pray or continually affirm. I don't think there's any real difference between prayer and affirmation. I don't use either one of them. I use declarations. I just declare and I believe. And I pretty much receive. Hey, Larry, thank you so much for that. That's very, very helpful. You have no idea how helpful those super chats are. They really do keep the lights on. Traveled to India after his resurrection. Actually, I just talked about this, Sebastian. Like I said, I have no memory of it, but I really hope to God he did go back to India with Ishti and have a family, like the Hindus believe. There's a whole bunch of Hindus who believe that he was there before he taught in Israel and came back afterwards. So I just absolutely I love the idea of it. I have watched a little bit of The Chosen. It's a very interesting watch for me because there's some moments. Well, there was one moment in particular I thought was really fascinating. Was the moment he met John was on a beach next to boats, which came from my regression 20 years ago, but the scene didn't play out the way it did in my regression. But it was like, oh my gosh, that is right where it looks very much like my memory of that. I did fall away from The Chosen when I started hearing the messianic stuff. When he starts talking about the Messiah, and they start playing it up like he's the Messiah, because that would go completely against everything that I remember from him. I mean, he specifically did not. We specifically did not go around these scenes because they wanted him to become Messiah, and he refused to do it because his whole teaching is about your divinity, about your power, about you stepping into the role of creator because you're already creating. And to say you're looking for a Messiah or a Savior or a Christ is basically taking power away from people and trying to put it in something outside of themselves. But what he was teaching was the power is all within you. And so to me, when I watch it, it's beautifully done. But it's just like reading the Bible. There's parts of it I just can't do. I'm in the process right now of editing a video about the Sermon on the Mount, and it's fascinating because the very first few are beautiful, loving things, the Beatitudes, right? But then the bottom 2/3 of it is all Judaic prophecy and Judaic law and creating. And I really firmly believe this is a prime example of things that have been added to the teachings of Jeshua. So my friend wrote a note to me. Told her, once I master astral travel, I will come to her house and tell her what her note says. Well, Becky, let's talk about that for a second. Once I master astral travel, that is a present moment statement, which means you can't astral travel. So your faith is that you can't and that you're not doing it. See, when I did my astral travel, I laid down and I said, okay. I focused on my feet. I felt my feet. I said, I'm leaving my feet. And then I slowly brought the feeling up to my shins, my knees, my calves, my thighs. And next thing you know, I was out of my body. And that's okay. Well, I'm out. I am going to Delaware. So it wasn't about putting it ahead of me and being able to do it at some point. It was about me doing it right here, right now. And the I am moment is not the I will be moment. So what you want to do is get very present moment oriented and really dive into the fact that you are creating and you are the creator. And it's not something you have to really learn to do. It's just something you have to choose to do. And that's the biggest teaching I can tell anybody. It's crazy how you answered my question before you even saw the question. No coincidence, I tell you. There you go. In our next life, we can come back as an animal. I love dogs, and that would be great. I think you can come back as anything you want. I think this is a product of illusion and belief, and I think that we choose potentials. I don't think there's a fate or a destiny, but I truly believe I'd like to experience that life. Doesn't mean I'm fated to do a specific path. That experience, I want to go down and be an animal for a while. Sure, why not? And in a lot of the Eastern traditions, they think there's various evolutions, and so that in their reincarnation cycle, they go through animals as well. Beautiful. Do or do not. There is no try. Absolutely. And remember this, fear leads to the dark side. um, Yoda also said, and this is something that I think that people could learn a lot from. He said, named must your fears be, before banish it you can. Named must your fears be, before you banish it you can. If you just go through your life and you started just saying, oh, that's just a fear. That's just a fear. And you started releasing your fears. Buddha said the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. And so you start naming your fears, then you go, then they're external. You're no longer in fear. By naming it, they're now in your hand. You can release them. So start naming your fears and releasing them. Excellent. Good answer, Angel. Great. Did I see any UFOs as John the Beloved? I have no memories of seeing UFOs of John the Beloved, but I have seen 3 very strange things as John Davis, which, if you'd be interested in hearing those, I think I told them on one of these live streams before. But if you guys want to hear them, I'll tell them. Let me know if you want to hear them, and I'll tell them if that's something you're interested in. I think that God is unlimited, and God being unlimited, the universe is part of God, and I think it's almost ridiculous to think that we're alone in this universe, and that there's not other consciousnesses out there that are creating their own experiences elsewhere, and they might have little short gray bodies for all we know. Could really multiply. Emily, it's a fantastic question. Could he really multiply food or fish in real life? How do those things happen? I have no memory of those miracles, most of those miracles, and I think many of them are stories and fabrications that were added in. But I do believe that, let me put it this way. When you believe, you receive. And his belief was pure and strong. So manifestations could have easily happened by, the loaves and fishes, I believe they're receiving. And then for all we know, they all chipped in a little bit, and created something more. Or who knows? It could totally have been a physical manifestation as well. I've had some of those things happen in my life, so I'm UFO it, huh? You want to hear the UFO stories? Okay, I'll tell you my three UFO stories. That's John Davis. The first one happened. I was I was very much a young newlywed. I was married to my son's mother at the time, and we were living with her grandmother because her grandmother was very elderly, and we were there to take care of her. And where she lived in New Kensington, Pennsylvania, and she lived on top of a hill. And from her front lawn, you could see multiple cities, and it was 4th of July, and we could sit on her front lawn at night. We could watch fireworks displays from all these different cities. So we're out in the front yard, we're watching it, and this one's going off and this one's going off. And up in the sky, you could see the planes flying across New Kensington into Pittsburgh. And they're just slowly crawling across the sky like planes do. And I'm sitting there just looking up. I see these planes. And suddenly something catches my attention. And it's coming from the right to the left. And I look over and I see something moving in really fast, and I say to my wife, I say, look at that. She turns her head. And by the time she turns her head, it was a third of the way across the sky. So it was, it had to be going tens of thousands of miles an hour. And I'm focusing my eyes on it. As it crosses over top of me, I realize it's not one but two, and they're swirling around each other. And they just zoom, and disappeared across the sky. So that was my first odd experience. Now I thought, was this a satellite? Was this? But the speed was, it was so fast that I can't imagine anything moving that fast. 'Cause I almost could not track it with my eyes. The second one was a very good friend of mine named Bill Huddle. He used to play King Henry VIII at Renaissance festivals. And Bill was 6'8". He was 550 pounds, a very big, big man. And I'm a 6'1" man, but Bill used to hug me and my head would hit his chest. That's how big he was. And he was just a lovely, lovely man. And his father had passed away. And we were all down in Ocean City, Maryland, and it was a bunch of us, and Bill and I had known each other forever. And they all went to bed, and Bill and I sat on the balcony of this condo, just looking out over the ocean. And to be honest with you, we had just closed the bar. So we're sitting there, and we're talking about his father, and we're talking about he's like, yeah, he's with mom now, and we're just talking about how's Bill doing, giving him a way past his grief. And the whole time we're talking, out over the ocean, it looks like a helicopter hovering. You can't hear anything, but it just looks like way out there's a helicopter hovering. And we're like talking, and we're looking at this light out there. It's just a light, right? And all of a sudden this light goes, boom, goes straight up, straight out, and like off into space. And Bill says, "Did you see that?" I said, "I sure did." He says, "Good, I'm glad I'm not the only one." So that was the second one. Now for my big story. This is the big story for me. I was staying at my mom's house in Delaware, and she lived on what was known as Airport Road, with a little grass airfield. And it was a full moon night, not a cloud in the sky, and where the room that I was staying in was on the second floor. And I was sitting by a window watching television, and I looked out the window, and I could see what looked like a dark cloud, like one little tiny dark cloud. And I'm looking at this cloud, and the more I focused on this cloud, the more I realized the edges were straight. And they were straight, and then the corners were curved, and it was triangular shaped with curved corners. No lights, no sound. And the way my mom's house was, you could open the window and step right out onto the roof. So this thing's coming, and I'm watching this thing come. Totally silently, very slowly, comes directly over my house. And it was wider than my mom's yard. And my mom's a good-sized yard, probably. So it was easily more than 150 feet across. Easily. Drifted directly across my house. I stepped out onto the roof. I walked up, and I watched it go over my house, and just drifted right across, and just headed north. I ran downstairs. I woke up my mom. I said, "Mom, I just saw this thing go over our house." She was all mad because I woke her up. She says, "It was probably a rocket from Wallops Island, because they launched satellites out of Wallops Island, Virginia." And I said, "Mom, this was no rocket. It's right over our house." But we never really talked about it again. Years later, I start seeing all these UFO shows, these triangular-shaped things. I'm like, that looks very similar to it, but it didn't have any of the lights. And it was completely silent, and it drifted directly over the house. But then I also started thinking about the fact that it was flying directly due north. Well, directly due north of us by about an hour was the largest Air Force base on the East Coast, Dover Air Force Base. So I don't know whether it was an alien, or whether it was a UFO, or whether it was definitely a UFO. I couldn't identify it, but I don't know whether it was a military thing. But it was heading towards Dover Air Base. So anyway, those are my three stories. How does one become a channel, or a Reiki healer, or a medium? Are there schools, or does practicing medium take on students? How can you tell a genuine practitioner from a scammer? Everyone channels all the time. It's not a matter of finding the connection. It's a matter of acknowledging the connection. Every day, you probably have that moment where you'll think of something and a picture will pop in your head, and you'll get that moment, or you'll say the right thing to someone at the right time. And it's a matter of you practicing. That's why the video that went out today about automatic writing, it's a great way to start, because once you open the channel through that process, what happens next is you start to then get information in different ways. I walk down the street, I hear my name called, and like literally, John, like turn around, right? And I know John's a generic name, but there's nobody there when I turn. And my friend Tim, I went to visit him, and I'm talking to him, and a photograph popped into my head that he showed me years before. And it was a photograph of his girlfriend sitting on the other side of a bonfire. And they had been out shooting model rockets off, because it was one of his hobbies. And I saw this picture popped into my head, and I said to him, you need to take her out to launch rockets, and you need to propose to her while you're out there. And he says, you're freaking me out. I go, why? He says, and he pulls out a model rocket. He opens the cone. Inside the nose cone was the engagement ring. He was about to fire it off, because she liked to run and catch them. So he was going to fire it off. She was going to run and catch it. And the engagement ring was going to be right there. So I had this image pop in my head. But the only reason I had those things start to happen to me is because I was open to it, and I just trusted that I was getting information. Now, all trust is developed by results over time. Once you meet somebody who's doing it well, the first thing they should tell you is that you have the ability. You already have the ability, because if they're selling that you have to come to them for the information, then they're not really delivering the information, in my opinion. Like even I've done many courses, but even them they're promoted as this can give you the opportunity to open up to yourself. But there are many people who make a living off of being that medium, so they want you to think of them as the way to get to your connection. But you have all of the abilities of everybody. You have all of the abilities. It's just a matter of you having the belief that you can do it. And once you have the belief, then you'll start to witness the evidence of it. And also understand Reiki is people have asked me a lot about Reiki. Reiki was really invented in 1920. And it's not real. People ask me if it's an ancient healing modality. If you do a little bit of study, it was formulated in the 1920s. What do you think about Jesus intimating John would not die until he returned? Okay, this is something that I have spent a lot of time studying, because Peter says to Joshua, what of him? Pointing to John, and Joshua says, if I want him to stay until I return, what's that to you? I'm talking to you. And from that point on, the disciples thought that John would not die. So I'm like, well, what does that mean? And then I had this weird idea one time. I was wondering whether or not the memories of John, or the soul of John, or whatever, has just continually reincarnated and never spent time on the other side. Which is why, in one of my times I crossed over, I was literally told, "You're not supposed to be here yet," which was really interesting. So I started doing research on it. I started diving back, seeing if I could find some kind of proof, and couldn't find any information. Finally, I was preparing to write a book, and I was looking at titles, trying to find a book, and I came up with the idea of saying "I, John," because I just think it's kind of a cool title. So, of course, I hopped online to see if it was already out there, and there were a couple different books called "I, John." One of them, though, was an old book, and out of print for a long, long time. And something intrigued me about that book, and it's now on my shelf over there. So I bought it, and I started reading it. And it was very fascinating. It was about a guy named John who remembered being John the Beloved. He lived in New Jersey, right across the bay from where I ended up living in Robes Beach. He ended up moving to Ohio, which is where I'm sitting right now. He was in performance arts, which is what I had done for a living. And he died just before I was born. So it was a real fascinating find, because it was like, this story is, is that the incarnation of John prior to me, right? And then Edgar Casey said, John the Beloved would again be named John. There the oneness of God is known. And I was like, so, yeah, to me, the whole John, I just think it's the consciousness of John staying. Now, in my regression, they were asking, why, what's the purpose of this life? And it was basically to stay here, to be the resonance here, the vibration here of that teaching, that expression. So I don't fully understand what it means, but that's what I know of that. So thank you very much, Brent. That is very, very helpful. Let's dive back in. Bridget, that's at the end of the book of John. I have not heard of Jacobo Grinberg. I have to look into Jacobo. Oh, cool! I'll have to dive in. Yeah. So, to me, when I look at the whole, John not dying thing, I go back once again and I question what is reincarnation, and I have to wonder whether it's the consciousness staying here, or whether it's, is there just one? Is there many? I don't necessarily think I understand what reincarnation is, and I think that all of our chosen beliefs and thoughts are all theoretical anyway, in the physical world. So it's a matter of, if you believe in reincarnation and the one soul theory, great. I'm open to it. I'm very open to it, but I'm also open to the idea that I might not be the only one, and I really don't think it matters who anybody was in a past life. I think it only matters who you are in the only moment you're conscious. The thought, word, and deed moment, the I am moment. Moses said God's name is I am, and whatever you ask in God's name is granted. I am blank. So you create from that space. So it doesn't matter. He didn't say I was or I will be. He says I am. So in this moment, you are the creator. You are the pinpoint of creation. You have the ability to create love in this world, and you have the ability to create fear in this world. And what's happening now is there is a shift in consciousness where people are becoming more loving, and the people who are most fearful are getting louder and more vehement, but that's because they're losing. That's because they're losing grip on power, and they don't really have much more to say, and their dishonest ways to hold power are really starting to show themselves. And I'm not talking politics, I'm just talking in general. Does Jesus ever visit you in dreams like an old friend saying hello? It's a very interesting question, and I get questions like this quite a lot. I have a real firm belief that I'm one with Yeshua, and I'm one with Mary, and I'm one with my friend Bill, and I'm Huddle, and all my friends who've crossed over, and with my dog, and I believe that I'm one with them all the time. And sometimes I feel presence. I feel I get the goosebumps when I get that feeling, But I also can get that goosebumps when I just think of him. And I think the mere thinking of him is a connection to him. And I think it's a connection to Mother Mary and to Mariam, Ishti Mariam. And I believe we are all one. And so all of my friends are with me all the time, and I believe in eternal life. Because being out of body, there's one thing I was very clear on, is that my body was over there and I was over here. And so I believe in eternal life. And so I'm the one who's away. They're the one, they're not away. I'm the one who's away, or you're the one who's away. Trying to see where we're going here. It's like people often ask me when I do channeling work, who am I channeling? Because they're looking for an individual. They're looking for an entity. And I believe I'm just connecting to the oneness of God. And I believe I'm connecting into the infinite knowledge. Edgar Cayce would call it the Akashic Records, which is all wisdom, all knowledge. So we have a different label for it. He calls it the Akashic Records. I call it the oneness of God, right? And I think that you all have that ability. You all have the power within yourself to acknowledge it. God is at the bottom of every breath you take. The place of you without fear, right there, is the connection. And that's why when I talk about automatic writing, I talk about the idea of first taking a big deep breath, and relaxing. Think of what you want to write or what you want to talk about. What I do is I write somebody's name on a sheet of paper, and I just exhale. And I don't try to listen. All I try to do is just whatever word pops into my head, I write it down. I don't try to hear whole sentences. I don't try to get a whole line of thought. I just, whatever pops into my head, I write down. Sometimes it's one word with a period behind it. Sometimes it's in a complete sentence. But after I get a few of those words down on paper, that's when it just starts to flow and starts to write itself. And it's a matter of you stepping out of the way and just realizing the information coming through you is coming through you. But the interesting part about that is it's coming through your physical body from your higher self, your Holy Spirit consciousness, the greater you. And so it's, acknowledge it. The wisdom is there. I'm sure that many of you have had the experience where you're in a conversation and you use a word that you've never used, and it just pops out, and it's like, and you look up the word, it's the exact precise word that you needed at that moment. And I've met so many people who've had that experience. I've had that experience. And what it is just tapping in. You were looking for a feeling of a word, and it gave you the precise word. So that's channeling. So let me dive down here again. Yeah, I don't know anything about Pachita, so I'd have to look into that. But the thing is, though, people get surgery without a scar. The physical body, as I said, is a product of belief. And if you believe you're going to heal without a scar, you're going to heal without a scar. So, oftentimes people will put faith in others because they can't put faith in themselves. And as Jeshua said, it's your faith that heals you. The woman touched his garment and was healed. It's your faith that heals you. And they can put faith that Pachita could heal them, and they would be healed. I had a woman say to me one time, she says, "I think you healed me." I said, "Then that's what happened." Because I understood didn't matter if it was me or her. It was her belief about it that it was. And so for me, it was just, then that's what happened. So that's okay, Bridget. We're going to wind down here in a few minutes anyway, so my voice is getting a little tired. Okay, so Emily, it's hard to do it is your present moment belief. I am easily getting information and automatic writing. And no, and you can't think ahead. Whatever one single word pops in your head, even if it's a picture, write down what the picture is. Don't try to formulate a thought because you're trying, which means it's not happening. Don't believe it's hard. Believe you're easily getting information. Thank you, God, for the easy information that is flowing through me to this piece of paper in front of me. But as long as you think it's going to be hard or that you're trying to do it, that's the limitation. Do you find it's like touching threads of a spider web and you get the vibrations and you know exactly what's going? I'm not really 100% sure what you're talking about. I don't really use a lot of metaphors that way. Touching webs those by feeling the vibrations. To me, if you're talking about automatic writing, to me it's like just basically the exhale is a big part of it for me. It's because the thoughts of I can't do this or this is hard or I'm struggling to do this, those are all fears. And the way our body releases fear is through an exhale. Because when we get into fear, we store air in our body so we can run faster. So and then I put myself in a state of fearlessness. And what did the Buddha say? Secret to enlightenment is the eradication of fear. So I put myself in a state of fearlessness. Whatever thought pops in my head, I write it down. I don't try to think something. I just relax. Let it happen. Yeah, it's interesting, Joseph. You're amazed how powerful our thoughts are. Our thoughts are our reality. It's like perception is reality. What we think we perceive, and you can believe the world is a crappy place and have a crappy life, or you can believe the world is a loving place and have a loving life. But it's all a matter of your choice. And you can live side by side with somebody who's living a loving life and still have a crappy life because it's your choice, your experience. And so it's just a matter of the more loving you are, the more you can change the people around you to see a loving world. And that's really the key to it all. You are quite welcome, Emily. It's funny how the Jesuit refer to God as Father. You got to remember, back then, it was a very patriarchal time, and everything was about the patriarchy. People have often asked me what was it like back then. Take away the machine guns, and it was a lot like the Taliban. Women were subjugated, men were ruling, and the head of the house, and the whole thing. So it was. Think about it along the lines of take away the machine guns, and that's kind of what the world was like back then. So, to have someone walking through that professing love was a miracle, totally miraculous, and it was just beautiful. So, would he have referred to him as the Father? I don't have a memory of him saying it that way, but it's highly likely. But I do know. He believed in the oneness of God. Even the Bible says the Father and I are one. So sure. I guess that's the best way I can answer it. Bridget's back! Yay! I get messages. I'll go. Is that because of my vibration, or they just aren't talking to me? Did you piss him off? No, I'm kidding. for a channel to receive, a channel has to be receptive. And oftentimes our world can absolutely take over our thoughts and our beliefs and it can cloud our connection, because it takes a lack of stress, a lack of fear, a lack of anxiety to get true connection. Because God is love, and what you're connecting to is the love of God when you're getting information. So when the world is overwhelming you, it's much harder to connect. But it's a matter of going, okay, that's just a choice. I am easily connecting. I'm joyfully connecting. I'm easily experiencing my connection with God in fun and joyful ways. And if you change your perception and your belief about the way you connect and how you can connect at any time, your information will come very, very quickly. Oh, great, Donna. That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, Heidi, you think it's hard not to be too much in your head. That is the moral of the Adam and Eve story. They ate from the tree of knowledge and they got kicked out of paradise. Paradise is a feeling. Knowledge is in your head. They got too much in their head and out of their feeling hearts. The connection is found in their feelings. Does it feel loving to you? Follow that. Does it feel fearful to you or judgmental to you? Don't follow that, right? Does getting into trying make you feel anxious? Then release the anxiety and stop trying and start declaring, I am receiving. I am creating. All of your present moment statements are married to a belief. And you can also say something and not believe it, which is called cognitive dissonance, right? So, and Shakespeare said, words without thoughts never to heaven go. So you have to really start to get to the point where you're identifying the feelings. And when you find the joyful, loving feelings, that's the connection to source. And when you find yourself getting stressed about how, let me give you an example. When I first had my first Kundalini rising experience, I was bringing the heat up my body and it got to my chest and it wouldn't go any higher. And I started trying to force it, trying to struggle. Go, get out. And it just, nothing was happening. And then I heard a thought that said, relax into it. You have to let go. You have to just let go. Exhale. And just let whatever flows flow. And you'll hear me when I do readings, you'll hear me say to people, I have no idea what I'm writing. I have no clue what I'm writing. So why don't you tell me what I'm writing? Because, after I read it to them, I'll say, tell me what I'm talking about, because I have no clue, right? Because to me, it's important that when I'm just writing it, I could be saying the weirdest, craziest stuff, but sometimes it's the weirdest, craziest stuff that connects. I had one woman who, I called her, I said, you're truly scrumptious. And then I called her Choochie Face. And she said, oh my God, my husband used to sing those songs from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. But I had no clue, but they came across in the writing. But had I judged what I was writing, had I started to read into them, I might not have written them down. I just wrote them down, and that's the key. It's not your reading; it's theirs. So, well, thank you, Larry. I plan on having an incredible Saturday, hanging out with my kid. What are your thoughts on the emerald tablets? Are you which emerald tablets are you talking about? There are actually multiple stories on emerald tablets. Are you talking about the Mormon tablets, or the South American, or the Egyptian tablets? I don't have a lot of thoughts on any of those things, really, because I think that all of those things are products of belief and faith, and I don't think the mystical stories we hear about things like that are really important, because they're just constructs within the illusion of belief. And so, to me, it's really not something I dive into. Anyway, I'm going to wind this thing down, my friends. This has been a lovely, lovely time, and I'm really starting to lose my voice a little bit here talking so much. I hope you guys have a great New Year. This has been a wonderful time. Thank you for the super chats. They honestly do keep my lights on. They keep a roof over my head. And you guys have a great night and a great weekend. And I'll see you next year. Have a great day. I'll see you. Thank you for joining us at the Live Loving live stream. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and visit us at johnofnew.com.